Welcome to The End of Sport, a collective of comrades committed to analyzing contemporary capitalist sport. This isn't a show about box scores or highlights. We're here to dismantle the spectacle, the machinery of sport under capitalism, the lines of harm, and the axes of exploitation that keeps the industry running. We're a proud member of Harbinger Media Alliance, an independent group of podcasters committed to social justice, critical journalism, mutual aid mobilization, and knowledge dissemination. And good news, we are now available, finally, in video format on YouTube, and you can keep up with us on Instagram, Bluesky, and even TikTok, following @EndOfSportPod. Please follow, like, share, and interact with us as we enter this new era for the show. This is not your typical sports show. This is the end of sport.
McKenzie Forbes is a professional basketball player, former WNBA draft pick, and college star at USC and Harvard. McKenzie, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
How are you doing, guys? I'm happy to be here.
We're doing great. It's awesome. We're back from a long hiatus, and it's like very exciting for us to be able to talk to an athlete first, because that's kind of like, to us, always our most exciting opportunity is to talk to the people who actually experience sport, as opposed to just talk about sport, which is what our colleagues and we do as academics, right? But you folks are really the reason we do this, because the experiences you have in the context of athletic labor, that's what really it's all about. And the problem for us so often is that athletes are very guarded, right, when they speak to the media and so forth, for good reason, because often there's real potential for backlash and so forth, and people will often prioritize their careers, right, and their well-being over, necessarily saying what they really think. But I know that you have a much higher tolerance for that than most, and so I'm really excited to pick your brain about some kind of crucial issues in the world of labor, exploitation, and politics more broadly in sport. So that really starts with, because this is a topic that we always talk about on the show, given its importance geopolitically and ethically, the question of Gaza. Can you start by sharing with us how you understand this so-called conflict in Gaza and how you would characterize it?
Yeah, I think to me it's plain and clear a genocide. I think we've seen overwhelming evidence. We've had overwhelming confirmation from the International Criminal Court of Justice. And I think, obviously, since the events of October 7th, 2023, it's been brought in a different way to the world stage. But I think those of us who have been following the situation in Palestine, like, it's been an issue of settler colonialism. And I think genocide since, the Nakba in 1948. And so I think these recent events have just been an escalation of that. But as we know, it's settler colonialism through and through. Textbook, you see it in the West Bank, you see it in Gaza more, outright bearing its imperialism and settler colonialism bearing its ugly face. So for me, that's just an issue that is a no-brainer. I think we all have a responsibility to speak up and speak out against that. I think athletes in particular have a unique platform in which, we or how I see it is we kind of have a different audience that may not be coming across these type of things, these geopolitical issues, especially internationally. And so that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And like you said, if you've been following since everything began, how can you not believe the evidence? And so in thinking about when it started, since everything began, if I'm understanding correctly and remembering correctly, you were playing exceptionally well at USC during the first year of the genocide. Can you tell us a bit what that was like? Were other players and coaches talking about it? Were you, or conversely, were you asked to not speak about it? What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was definitely something that I was very aware of. Being at a school like USC, being in Los Angeles, there's a lot, a lot of crossover between like the Israeli population and the population here. Being at such a pretentious institution like USC, who's has their hands directly tied in profiting off of genocide. So definitely consciously aware of that. I think it's something that, I wasn't originally too, oh, maybe I shouldn't post this, maybe I shouldn't. But I think when we saw the heightened kind of backlash and almost like witch hunt of college students across the nation at Columbia, at Harvard, that kind of like started in the Ivy Leagues, and I'm a former Ivy League student as well. And so definitely after that, I was hyper aware of kind of the, like witch hunt that's going out against college students, from CNN and Fox News pundits to university presidents. So I definitely became aware of it. It was something that was talked about in the locker room. It kind of came up just naturally through maybe more like BDS conversations. Like I remember I came in and I was like, or maybe someone asked me like, oh, like, do you want Starbucks? I'm like, oh, I'm not drinking Starbucks. I'm boycotting, or I'm boycotting this and that. And that kind of opened the doorway to conversations. I actually got one teammate who was like bringing in Starbucks every day. And she was like, Kenzie, like I changed like to Dunkin' Donuts, like, or I changed to this and that, or I've been looking for other options. So that was pretty cool to see. And I think, for some time, I think I thought nobody really read my stories, or people, were just scrolling through. But it was kind of through conversations like that I realized like, oh, people are actually engaging with this, asking follow-up questions. Like, I saw you posted this thing. Like, what does that really mean? Like, can you send me more things? I had like a couple assistant coaches that were like, again, as we know, like the powers that be, they're kind of like, not secretly, but, kind of on the side comments like, oh, like that's so cool, or like you should get, like, we had a lot of celebrities coming to our games at USC that year, like, oh, you should get this celebrity on, like, to say free Palestine, like things like that, but never from really like high up administration. It would kind of be like teammates, or like I said, assistant coaches who I've known for a really long time. But again, I think everyone is hyper aware of what can happen if you speak out against the genocide. You can lose your job, you can, they'll come after you. So, but yeah, I think it was cool to see the few teammates that were really open-minded in that way. And obviously we had protests on campus that I attended, and it was funny. One time I just ran into one of my teammates. She was like scootering to class, and I was at the protest, and she's like, yo, what's going on? Like, and so she just kind of like stood with me for a bit, and we were able to talk about things, and she was able to see firsthand like the police in full, combat armor harassing, our fellow classmates. And so I think things like that were pretty eye-opening for some of my teammates amidst the season.
And I think it's really cool how you talk about how folks being open-minded, like teammates being open-minded to changing from Starbucks to Dunkin' Donuts. I'm really curious, why do you think some athletes have spoken out, others have not? Do you think what do you think prompts whether or not an athlete speaks out in terms of their own personal politics, or whether or not they're aware? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's something I think about a lot. Me and my brother talk about it a lot. He was also a college athlete and now a professional athlete. I think Palestine being an international issue really kind of takes it another level in terms of, I think a lot of athletes at this point, especially in women's basketball, predominantly Black, predominantly women, a lot of gay women. So I think people are aware, of like, people are willing to say like police brutality exists, and like, these domestic issues. Like, I think that's like, allowed, like, okay to say, like, like no one's really going to go against that. But I think when it gets to an international stage, it gets a little more tricky for people to kind of connect the dots and how that is something that affects you. And so I think thinking about things like, our tax money is going to funding these weapons manufacturing companies, and essentially like aiding in genocide, things like that are a little bit more layered. I don't know that a lot of athletes think an international thing relates to them, or that it's their business, or that anything they say will help or even matter. And I think the second part of that is, if they do understand, then it's like the fear component of, what if my coach thinks differently and they don't play me? Or what if I don't? I mean, I was even thinking things of like, in terms of my draft stock, like what if this reflects on me in such a way, people don't want that on their team, they don't want, trouble, whatever. And to me, it's obviously losing your draft status is nothing compared to what people in Gaza are going through. So that's how I look at it. But I think for a lot of athletes, they're considering all these things. They're considering, a lot of athletes are influencers now. They're considering their follower count. You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot at play in financially and so in your social status for sure. Like I think it definitely takes courage and especially the way they've kind of upped the backlash on people who speak up against it. I think there's things at stake for sure.
No, and look, I have so much admiration for, what you said, because I think that it's objectively it's correct. Like obviously there are material things at stake for people. We know because of the Palestine exception that people are canceled in the most sort of fundamental senses over this issue more than any other issue. So it's not like it's like ill-informed to think that there's a lot at stake, but nonetheless, you have spoken. And so I have tremendous admiration for you to put aside your kind of personal risks and do what was right regardless. But then as a consequence, I'm actually really curious then to hear, you were drafted into the WNBA in 2024. Do you feel like your professional career has been affected in any way by your willingness to speak on this topic?
I can't say that my first answer is I don't know. Like, technically I don't know
Of course.
what could be being said about me, yeah, or thought about me. Obviously there exists bias outside of observing my peer basketball skill. I'm definitely aware of some higher ups in the professional basketball world, both men and women's side, who are definitely Zionists and definitely not, in support of the freedom of the Palestinian people. And so I think for me, I'm just like, it could be happening. I don't know how much it helps me to kind of dwell on that.
No, good point.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that that's something that we have to consider. I think it's been cool to see like really high profile athletes like Kyrie Irving speak out against it. Natasha Cloud of the New York Liberty. So that's been really encouraging to see. And you just hope that, it can empower more people. And I think that's another reason why I feel like I have to, is someone might see my story and feel empowered to do the same.
It is incredible, McKenzie, how you come to this with just so much clarity and courage. And it's not an easy thing to do when your career could be at stake, your personal safety could be at stake. There's a lot on the line here. And so how did you come to have such clarity and courage with this political and ethical conviction? Because it's not, especially being in the US, it's not as common as we would think these days. And so how did you arrive there?
Yeah. I think, it's a combination of just life experience, coming from a family who has always encouraged me to question things, not take anything at face value. My grandma definitely instilled that in me, and she was always someone who was speaking out against things. I remember even way back in high school, just with all the Black Lives Matter protests and riots and kind of just going through that as a teenager. I was 14, 15, 16 when that was going on. So my grandma, from a really young age, I think, was always encouraging us to question authority and to make sure we read and we make sure we have critical analysis and kind of develop our own opinion on things and not just take kind of whatever we were fed. And so I think that is something that I've carried with me. I have 3 older brothers, my oldest of which who graduated from Occidental College in Pasadena. And I remember the first time like him coming home from break and he had like I think it was like a PSC, like Palestine Solidarity Committee like sticker on his laptop.
Oh,
and
wow.
Me and my other 2 brothers were kind of like, oh, what's that? Like, what's this about? And he's like, oh, I've been organizing with them. And my friend, kind of like put me on. And so ever since then, and that was like 2014, 2015. And so, and then obviously just going to school and at Harvard, I have Palestinian friends. I had organized with PSC a bit there, and we'd done a lot of collaboration events with Neighbor Program, which was more of a Pan-African socialist org and PSC. So just kind of all those connections, I think to me, it's a no-brainer.
Oh man, that is so instructive. Like I'm moved to kind of hear that story because like not so almost selfishly, but like as an educator, as people in a university context, it shows like the potential impact, right? If you really do talk, instead of being afraid, if you really talk about these things, if we can encourage our students, we have so many wonderful students on our campuses. In fact, I should go much further than that. Like we saw, especially in 2024, it was the wonderful students on our campuses who were among the only people North American society, right, who were driving this conversation and willing to tell the truth, right? And so, like, it is our responsibility as those with more power in these institutions to protect those spaces as much as possible and to encourage voices, because you're like living proof of what can happen when we allow these conversations to flourish. And then someone like you who has, as you say, a bigger platform, you started with that, right? You have a bigger platform, but you've like taken those conversations and then like disseminated them further, right? And this is like, it's a really powerful impact, and it matters. So yeah, thank you for walking us through that.
Something my brother said to me that was really powerful, because I said we talk about these things, and there is moments where I'm like should I block this person from my story to not see this, and he kind of made a great point, which was that I just remembered from your comment, which was like, they should be scared to be supporting genocide in public. You know what I mean? Like we should be the ones who are, we have the moral clarity and the backing to know that we are on the right side of history. And so I think it's really just, like flipping that script of like, you should be publicly shamed for supporting genocide,
Okay. Now, like, look, contrary to prevailing sentiments, the genocide in Gaza is decidedly not over, right? It's just shifted shape. There's no question about that. But at the same time, right, conditions in the United States, we know for sure, have further deteriorated. The Trump regime has blatantly violated the sovereignty of Venezuela, seriously threatened Greenland and Iran, and frankly, Mexico, Colombia, Canada, like every day, there's something else, it seems like. And at the same time, internally, the president's personal police squad in ICE and all the other iterations of DHS are terrorizing all non-white people, essentially. And right now, currently, basically waging war on Minneapolis, St. Paul, having already murdered Renee Good in cold blood. Excuse me. I should say that again. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Having already murdered Renee Good in cold blood. What is the responsibility of athletes in this moment? Do you think athletes are doing enough right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think our responsibility is always bare minimum to speak out, whether that's through your social media platform, whether that's talking to your family, your friends, your teammates, coaches. Do I think we're doing enough? No. A moment that I think about a lot is when the NBA went on strike, when they were playing in the bubble, way back, was that 2020? And I just felt so much like hope and like momentum and like, this is going to be fire. Like this is like unprecedented. And it seems like ever since that was kind of squashed by the powers that be, that there hasn't really been that energy since. But I think there does need to be more organized action and I think just a re-energized movement, I think on the athlete side is definitely needed. Like, I think it's kind of more like one-off players. Like I would really love to see us kind of all get on the same page.
We completely agree with you. And I think that's what makes your position and your role, and as an athlete, as someone who speaks out about this, so unique and so needed. And I think that kind of unity and being on the same page is also so important. So I do want to switch gears just a little bit to focus on your basketball career as an athletic career. And just kind of, I guess, first part of the question, what is it like being a pro basketball player? Is it as glamorous and cool and fun as we think it might be? And I'm also really curious. So I read Courtney, she's a scholar in her field. Courtney Cox wrote a book about the women's basketball players. And in it, she talks about Athletes Unlimited and compares and contrasts it to the WNBA. And Athletes Unlimited, and maybe you can elaborate a bit on this, is super cool in that it's this league that helps keep WNBA players from going overseas because of all the geopolitical struggles and issues and barriers in that, but it also gives athletes a lot more autonomy and agency and say in how the league is running. And so I guess in kind of just giving us a snapshot of what it's like to be a professional women's basketball player, can you also talk about your experiences in the WNBA, in AU, and just kind of the similarities, differences, and just kind of overall what it's like?
Yeah. To answer the first part, I would say it's, to me, the best job in the world. I get to travel the world. I get to immerse myself in different cultures and get paid to play something literally a game that I've been playing since I was 3 years old. So for me, like, nothing beats that. I would say that a downside is that you are kind of living out of a suitcase. You're kind of always leaving, communities that you've built and you've grown to love, which I'm getting ready to do here, heading to Nashville on Monday. But I think, that's just the give and take and the sacrifice that you have to make. But I would say overwhelmingly, I'm having the time of my life. I'm definitely going to look back at this time of my life and be like, man, like there's nothing better than that. And then to answer the second part, Athletes Unlimited has been an incredible opportunity that I'm super grateful for. It's definitely a player led and a player focused organization. We are very well taken care of. It is extremely professional. And like you kind of touched on, Athletes Unlimited is, I forget the categorization, but it's not a nonprofit, but it's like a for-profit, I don't know. I think it's like philanthropy, but essentially each athlete gets to choose an athlete cause. And so you get to pick an organization that you want to donate your bonuses to. So any bonus that I earn this season through where I end up on the leaderboard, points, games won, quarters won, they match that and they actually donate it to an organization. So last year I partnered with Neighbor Program, which is a community organization in Sacramento that, political education, food distribution, free medical services for the homeless population of Sacramento, everything of that nature. So that was amazing. I think we raised about like $3,500 for them last year. So this year for Athletes Unlimited, I chose to partner with People's Program of Oakland. They have had a great impact on me since I chose to go to Berkeley back in 2017. One of the leaders of that organization, Abbas Muntakim, has been very impactful to me in my political development. I know that they're doing great work in the community of Oakland in terms of political education, making sure our neighbors are fed, and making sure our community is informed about, what affects them. So I'm really excited to partner with them. And just to be able to, to me, it's insane to be able to raise money just by, I'm going to play anyways, you know what I mean? I'm not really doing anything extra. So it's amazing.
That is amazing. No, I'm really excited. I have to learn more about this organization because my entire sort of career of scholarship is really thinking about the ways in which professional sport, capitalist professional sport, is so fundamentally exploitative, right? It's the ways in which, because there's a kind of capitalist class essentially that owns these leagues and commodifies players, right? Players actually don't get the working conditions they deserve. Players don't even get the compensation they deserve. Even in the NBA, the truth is, and I say the NBA because they're probably the gold standard for making the highest compensation you could kind of hope for in professional sport. But the truth is, they're generating all the value, right? They're there's nothing if it's not for LeBron James and company. So they should be getting, 85, 90, 95% of the revenue, and they're getting 50% of it. So actually they're technically exploited. So anytime I hear about a model where it's the athletes are in control and in charge, that's the model that we need and we deserve, right? It's really something to, I think, pay a lot of attention to.
One of my favorite professors from Harvard, sociology professor Rachel Myers, sociology of labor, things of that nature. We've had a lot of conversations about how, it's such an interesting position of a professional athlete because you, like the NBA players is a great example. You have all this money and wealth and power, but you're still a worker at the end of the day. And so it's if they could realize that power, it would just be, it would be so powerful, I think, because I think the problem for most of the workers is we don't have any money. We're all passing around the same.
Yes, no, you're right. That's exactly. They're the most influential workers in the world, in a way.
Yeah,
Anna, go on.
Yeah, and I think too, NBA, WNBA, that partnership, the WNBA came about because the NBA greenlit that organization, and so while I think it's important for men allies for women's sport, women athletes, at the end of the day, that is still intrinsically tied to the NBA. The WNBA is still tied to the NBA. We have a WNBA, but we don't have an MNBA. But right. Athletes Unlimited is its own entity. And I think that is a really powerful statement too for women's athletes' organization as well.
100%. 100%. And I think that's a part people kind of forget. And I think that's why Athletes Unlimited is so cool, because they have women's basketball, softball, women's volleyball as well. I think maybe one more, but yeah, it's really cool to see.
It's really fun to be able to talk to you honestly about almost every issue that I've been thinking about in the context of sport, right? Because as a pro athlete who's willing to talk about this stuff, right? It's like it just opens the door to every conversation. So that's why I have kind of questions that are all over the map a little bit. And one thing that, I think needs to be an increasing part of any conversation about kind of like labor, harm, and exploitation in the context of sport is this gambling thing. Right? Because we have seen in the last, especially 3 years or so, right? It's ubiquitous. It is absolutely everywhere. You literally can't experience sport, professional sport, without getting it through the lens of gambling. Because I mean, even I'm now realizing, like, I feel like half the networks that carry often local team games in the United States, they're like the FanDuel Sports Network now. Like the network is literally a gambling company that is bringing you the action. Yeah. It's like serving you up the gambling lines along the way, right? And like there's multiple ways of looking at it. Like one aspect of it is like it's really shitty actually for the gamblers. Like let's be clear, gambling is actually destroys people's lives. Like so it's a problem for the people who are doing the gambling, and it should be regulated and perhaps prohibited for that reason alone. But the thing that is even worse, because it's an indirect consequence that feels particularly unjust, right, is that it comes back around on the athletes, right? Because when people start gambling, fandom is already a bit of a weird phenomenon, right? Like I've written about this myself, but like when people even personally invest their identity in teams, they get a little bit too worked up sometimes in terms of like the results of the game and so forth. And we've seen that with college sports. Players at Ohio State, I remember in the NCAA men's basketball tournament a few years ago, getting death threats from their own fans because the team, like player lost the game. And that's sick stuff, but gambling takes it to the next level because now people are losing money and then they're blaming players for it. Right? When you're just trying to do your job, essentially, or in college for a long time, really not a job at all, right? You're being compensated only in the form of an education. You're students. You are the people. I always come back to it when I was at Duke. It's like, you don't come into my writing class with a bunch of athletes and other students in the room and like scream at them for like writing a bad topic sentence. But it's basically the same fucking thing when they come and scream at you in Cameron Indoor Arena, right? Because you're the same students doing a university activity, but we somehow like legitimize that you can treat them that way. So anyway, I would love to hear, because you've been playing during this era, I'm curious if you've kind of noticed or experienced it impacting your kind of quality of life or experience as a worker.
Yeah, I will say I've been luckily haven't experienced too much of that. I think I've definitely experienced the fan backlash. You don't want to search your name on Twitter after you have a bad game. Yeah, I would say I've been lucky to have not experienced too much of that kind of like insane fandom, like sending hate messages. I've definitely seen it a bit with teammates, like don't fuck up my parlay and this and that in the comments and DMs. Or I've seen tweets about me of what does she think she's doing, blah, 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 blah. After a game where I don't shoot it very well. You can definitely I know I've had like friends and family like that have search my name on Twitter and they're like getting all riled up about the comments. And I'm like, guys, we do not need to be doing that. It's literally just going to be, exactly like you're describing, these people who are gambling or have vested way too much of their own identity into the outcome of a women's college basketball game or a professional game. So I think luckily I haven't been too personally impacted by it, but I've definitely seen, I think at the NBA level, it's the most apparent, in terms of the gambling. And obviously now it's even seeping into players and coaches being kind of tied into it with these huge scandals. So I think it's sad. And like you're saying, it just to me is hypocritical of the NBA to be handing out these punishments and then being now back to Spurs versus Lakers on FanDuel,
Exactly. That's absolutely it.
So I teach a sport governance class and we talk a lot about gambling because while gambling is becoming more and more legal at professional levels, there's a really interesting discussion about whether or not gambling will be legal at the college level and for college sports, and that is a whole can of worms that is there and will have to be faced at some point. But in speaking about and thinking about like college sport, a lot has changed, radically so, during your time in college and since, obviously, on multiple fronts. And so for instance, early in your college career, during the March Madness tournament, there was obviously a considerable scandal and a reveal on TikTok about the different experiences and treatments that NCAA women's and men's basketball players and facilities and swag bags get. And so I'm wondering, can you speak to the changing landscape of college sports? Do you feel like things are getting better for women's athletes? Because there was a huge reconciling, or at least the NCAA had to own up, or at least make a public statement about what they did. My understanding is the numbers, that's still not parity or even close at the college level. But I'm curious, can you speak to that changing landscape? Is it really better, do you think, for college women athletes? And it can be yes, no, maybe in between, obviously.
Yeah, I think this particular issue is, for me, as I said, I grew up with 3 older brothers, and so kind of just growing up side by side with them, like I always was like, oh my gosh, like their team gets more shoes, they get more gear, like all, no matter what. And not to sound arrogant, but like I was always the best, like I was the best player in my family, like, but I was always the girl, and so I felt like I experienced that disparity from a young age, just seeing the type of gear that they got, and shoes and all of that. And so in college, obviously, I saw that same disparity, and like you mentioned, it was kind of brought to the national stage with the March Madness tournament and on TikTok. I think now it is a lot better. I think there's still obviously disparity, a huge disparity in terms of NIL and the salaries that the men are getting versus the women. But I think on the women's side, the fact that they're like some of these salaries are so just life-changing money. I know players who are getting $250,000 to play basketball at the college level. And so I think, to me, that's so life-changing. It's like, I can't even be, I'm like, okay, the men are getting $1 million. Like, okay, that's how it always is, but I definitely say it is better. Like, I think, a rising tide is lifting all boats, but I think there's still definitely a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. That's a good perspective on it. Okay. Before we lose you, I have to ask you about an issue that, I know this is true for Anna and I. This is so central to what we're thinking about in the kind of context of sport generally, and especially today. And it's been an issue that's been addressed head on, I think, very effectively in women's basketball, honestly, better than almost any other space. The kinds of conversations that happen about this are better in the world of women's basketball. But because we have you here as an athlete to speak to this, I think it's really important, because the truth is it's often weaponized in mainstream discourse, right? That women athletes don't want trans inclusion in women's sport. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's a line, right? That's delivered, I think, especially by the kind of MAGA movement and also the TERFs, who are trying to advance exactly the same project of trans exclusion. We hear that. And so I think it's quite an opportunity for us to have a woman athlete on the show with us here to ask this question too, right? I'm curious, how you feel about what you think of this movement of well-subsidized activism of mediocre former athletes like Riley Gaines, for instance, right, who tied for 5th or whatever, and that was life-changing in terms of the trauma that she experienced from that, right? And it's advanced this sort of moral panic that trans inclusion, and this is really the key, is somehow dangerous, right, or unfair or harmful for women athletes. As someone with a distinguished career in women's sport, what do you make of all that?
Yeah, obviously it's a bunch of hoopla. It's trying to cause, like you're saying, moral panic. I was actually in a class at Harvard that kind of, to me, in a kind of reactionary way, was kind of utilizing that, and had us write an essay about it. And in my opinion, didn't really educate the class enough before they just kind of let us gun ho and, hey, everyone give your opinion, and so, because I think that there was the Penn swimmer.
Leah Thomas, exactly. Leah Thomas,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, so with Leah Thomas back then, and I think anyone with a brain can immediately clock it as just transphobia. I think talking to any women's basketball player, to me, growing up as an athlete, I'm like, there's athletics is all about unfair advantages. If someone is 6'3" and I'm 5'11", you know what I mean? It's like that's kind of the thing that we celebrate in male athletes. Oh, Usain Bolt has these insane, like he's genetically, different, and Michael Phelps, his lungs are so much bigger than, you know what I mean? Like his lung capacity, and like that's celebrated. But do you know what I mean? So I'm like, to me, to scream the, it's unfair thing is kind of silly in that regard. But I think on the women's side, even in the WNBA, I mean, I was drafted to the Sparks, and I had a trans teammate in Leja Clarendon, and they were very open about their gender identity, and in the locker room, and it was very accepted. The rookies coming in, I mean, I think people just assume, that people are going to be transphobic, but I think like kind of similar to the Palestine conversation, it's like people are actually open and willing to learn, and especially when you're meeting, these real people that you're playing with, and you're building camaraderie. I mean, like Leja was, one of the most high respected players on our team, and so I think for them to kind of cause this fake, moral outrage.
I think it's so crucial when these big name athletes change the narrative and speak out in terms of justice, in terms of equity, in terms of what is the right thing to do. And also, I think, raise awareness and build that brand for women's sports. And speaking about building a brand and raising awareness around women's sports, your last season of college basketball was also the climax of the Caitlyn Clark effect in college. And so for anyone who's heard of Caitlyn Clark, which I would hope is like everyone who listens to this podcast and more, what do you make of her as a player and her impact on the sport and the ways in which she's been taken up by fans?
Yeah, obviously, like revolutionized the game at a college level. I think you saw with the rise of her stardom and similar players alongside her, Paige Beckers, Juju Watkins. There's just so many stars in women's college basketball now. I think, the average 40-year-old white man can name more women's college basketball players than men's at this point, which is pretty crazy to say. But yeah, I think obviously Caitlyn has brought so many eyes to the game, kind of similar to that Steph Curry effect of the excitement of shooting a long three was kind of brought to the women's side, which I think is incredible for the women's game in particular, obviously because we don't dunk the basketball. And so I think when you saw that kind of happen with Steph Curry, like, I mean, I grew up thinking threes were cooler than dunks. And so I think Caitlyn was able to bring a similar thing to the women's game of that excitement of like hitting a deep three. And so, yeah, I think to see her and like obviously her transition from college into the WNBA, there was a lot of political hoopla. I think there was a faction of right-wing people who were calling themselves women's basketball fans who were really just kind of using that as a Trojan horse to get their political agenda across. Like, I don't think she ever asked for that. But I think it was really interesting to see kind of like the political climate kind of entangled with the popularity of women's basketball. I mean, I'm sure that's interesting, especially interesting for you guys to look into. But it was definitely a huge cultural moment, and I think it definitely brought a lot of eyes to the game. Whether, I don't know, some people say all press is good press. I don't know. I think a lot of the players were kind of trying to sit with how to handle that, but it definitely expanded the game in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think before we wrap up, I think it's a really interesting point about when we talk about paying athletes what they're worth, that is still working within, Nathan will love this, working within a capitalist system of having labor compensated, that is still part and determining worth based on your performance. And I think, but those are still steps forward. And I think the Caitlyn Clark effect is bringing eyes to the game. Again, debatable if all press is good press. But at the end of the day, we are making steps forward in different ways, maybe in some ways that are not the way we want to move forward, but small steps forward are still steps forward. And so it'll be exciting to see what's next for women's basketball, because unless I guess you're a turf outside the Supreme Court who can't name a single women's professional player, people can typically name women's WNBA players more than men's NBA players. So I think that's a really, really great point in that. I just want to say thank you so much, McKenzie, for speaking about your identity as an athlete, as an activist, as a human being. We have so much we can learn from you and how you move through the world, how you live your life. And we are so, so grateful for you to be here. This is my first interview on the End of Sport podcast, and I'm so excited and so glad that it was with you. And so thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Of course, anytime. I think I enjoyed myself equally. And like I said, happy to run it back with new topics or whatever is going on in the world. I think, I admire what y'all do equally as much as you guys are interested in the life of an athlete. So I appreciate it. And I enjoyed the conversation.